Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The exploration team had been trekking through the dense, uncharted forest for days, each step taking them deeper into the unknown continent that had captured the imaginations of scholars and adventurers alike for centuries. Dr. Eleanor Reed, a seasoned archaeologist and the leader of the team, wiped the sweat from her brow and glanced up at the canopy of trees above. The sunlight filtered through the thick foliage, casting dappled shadows on the ground, but it did little to dispel the sense of foreboding that had settled over the group. Eleanor was a woman of science, grounded in the realities of the world she studied, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The rumors of an ancient civilization, lost to time and hidden somewhere on this continent, had drawn them here. But it was the whispers of a city that existed beyond the realm of understanding, a place where reality and illusion blurred, that had pushed her to lead this expedition. They called it the City of Nothingness, a place of myth and legend, dismissed by many as a mere fairy tale, but Eleanor was not one to dismiss the extraordinary. Her career had been built on the discovery of the impossible, and she had a gut feeling that this city, if it existed, would be the culmination of her life's work. Her team, however, was starting to lose faith. "We've been out here for nearly a week, Dr. Reed," said Marcus, a burly soldier who had been hired for his survival skills as much as for his combat experience. "There's nothing here but trees and rocks." Maybe the old stories were just that, stories. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked around at her team. There was Adam, the youngest member of the group, barely out of his graduate studies but brilliant in his field of ancient languages. He was the idealist of the group, his eyes filled with the excitement of discovery despite the hardships they faced. Then there was Lydia, a seasoned botanist, who had joined the expedition out of a love for the unknown, and lastly, there was Frank, the team's geologist, who had a knack for finding patterns in chaos. "We're close," Eleanor finally said, her voice filled with a quiet determination. "I can feel it." Adam nodded enthusiastically. "The old texts were clear, Dr. Reed. The City of Nothingness is protected by a barrier, an illusion that keeps it hidden from those who aren't worthy. We just need to figure out how to pierce that illusion." Marcus snorted. "If it even exists." Eleanor smiled slightly. "It exists, Marcus. And we're going to find it." They continued on, pushing through the thick underbrush, following a path that seemed to wind its way through the forest of its own accord. Hours passed, and just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the forest in a deep orange glow, they came upon a clearing. It was as if the trees had suddenly parted, revealing a wide expanse of open ground that seemed to stretch on forever. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine as she stepped into the clearing. There was something different here, something almost tangible in the air. It was as if the very fabric of reality had been twisted, and she had the distinct impression that they were standing on the threshold of something otherworldly. "This is it," Adam whispered, his voice filled with awe. "We're here." The others followed, their skepticism momentarily forgotten as they took in the sight before them. The clearing was perfectly circular, with no sign of trees or vegetation within its boundaries. The ground was smooth, almost unnaturally so, and in the center of the clearing stood a single stone obelisk, covered in ancient runes that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly light. Eleanor approached the obelisk cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out a hand to touch the cool stone, and as her fingers made contact, a wave of energy surged through her, nearly knocking her off her feet. "Dr. Reed." Lydia rushed forward, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay?" Eleanor nodded, though she was visibly shaken. "I'm fine. But this is something incredible. I've never felt anything like it." Adam was already examining the runes, his eyes wide with excitement. These symbols, they're similar to what we've seen in the ancient texts, but there are some variations. It's like they've been altered, as if they're part of a different language altogether. Can you read them? Marcus asked, his usual skepticism tempered by curiosity. I can try, Adam replied, his fingers tracing the runes as he muttered to himself. It's like a puzzle. I think it says, only those with hearts untainted may pass. The city reveals itself to the pure, and to the impure, it remains hidden in the void. What does that mean? Frank asked, frowning. Eleanor looked at the obelisk, her mind racing. It means we've found the entrance to the city of nothingness. But only those who are pure of heart can enter. Marcus crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. And how do we determine who's pure of heart? Sounds like a load of nonsense to me. Before Eleanor could respond, Adam took a deep breath and stepped toward the obelisk. As he did, the ground beneath his feet began to shimmer, and a faint, translucent barrier appeared before him, crackling with energy. The others watched in stunned silence as Adam reached out a hand and touched the barrier. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hum, the barrier parted, creating an opening just wide enough for him to pass through. Adam turned to the others, a triumphant smile on his face. It's real. The city is real. Without waiting for a response, he stepped through the opening, disappearing from sight. Adam, wait. Eleanor called out, but it was too late. He was gone. Marcus cursed under his breath and moved toward the barrier, but as he reached out to touch it, the barrier sparked violently, repelling him with a force that sent him stumbling back. Damn it! Marcus growled, glaring at the barrier. What the hell is this? Eleanor approached the barrier, her heart pounding. She couldn't lose Adam, not now, not when they were so close. Taking a deep breath, she reached out and touched the barrier, feeling the same surge of energy as before. But this time, the barrier didn't repel her. Instead, it seemed to soften, and she felt herself being pulled through, as if the very air around her was guiding her forward. She emerged on the other side, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the sight before her. The city of nothingness was unlike anything she had ever imagined. It was a place of contradictions, where reality and illusion merged into one. The buildings were ancient, yet they shimmered with a strange, otherworldly light, as if they were made of pure energy. The streets were empty, yet she could sense the presence of something, someone, watching them. Adam stood a few feet away, his eyes wide with wonder. Dr. Reed, it's incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Eleanor nodded, her mind racing. We need to find out what happened here. This city, it's more than just a myth. It's a gateway to something far greater. As the others joined them, one by one, each of them passing through the barrier with varying degrees of difficulty, they began to explore the city. The streets were narrow and winding, leading them deeper into the heart of the city. Everywhere they looked, there were symbols and runes carved into the stone, each one pulsating with that same eerie light, but it wasn't long before they began to notice something strange. The city seemed to shift and change around them, the buildings rearranging themselves as they moved. At first, they thought it was just their imaginations, but it soon became clear that the city was alive in some way, reacting to their presence. This place is a maze, Marcus muttered, his hand on his weapon as he scanned the area. It's like it's trying to trap us. It's not trying to trap us, Eleanor said, though she wasn't entirely sure. It's testing us. Testing us? Lydia echoed, her voice tinged with fear. For what? For purity, Adam said quietly. The city only reveals itself to those who are pure of heart. It's testing us to see if we're worthy. But what happens if we're not worthy? Frank asked, his voice trembling. Eleanor didn't have an answer for that, and the thought sent a shiver down her spine. They needed to be careful. This city was more than just an ancient ruin, it was a living entity, one that had its own rules and its own sense of morality. As they ventured deeper into the city, the challenges became more intense. The streets grew narrower, the buildings taller and more imposing. They encountered strange illusions, visions of people and places that couldn't possibly be real. At one point, they found themselves in what appeared to be a marketplace, bustling with activity. But as they approached, the people vanished, leaving only empty stalls and silence. "It's like the city is playing with us," Lydia whispered, her eyes darting nervously from side to side. "Showing us what it wants us to see." Eleanor nodded, her mind racing. "We need to stay focused. There has to be a reason why we're seeing these things. The city is trying to tell us something." They pressed on, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that they were being tested. But the further they went, the more the city seemed to push back. The illusions became darker, more menacing. They saw visions of their own worst fears, images of loved ones lost, of failures and regrets that had haunted them for years. For Eleanor, it was the memory of a failed expedition years earlier, one that had cost the lives of several members of her team. She had always blamed herself for their deaths, and now the city was forcing her to relive that pain, over and over again. "Dr. Reed, are you okay?" Adam asked, noticing the pained expression on her face. Eleanor forced a smile. "I'm fine, Adam. Just memories." He nodded, though he didn't press further. They all had their demons to face, and this city seemed determined to bring them to the surface. But as they continued, something changed. The city's illusions began to fade, replaced by something more tangible, more real. They found themselves in a grand hall, the walls lined with ancient texts and murals depicting scenes of a great war. At the far end of the hall stood a massive, intricately designed machine, humming with energy. "This must be the heart of the city," Adam said, his voice filled with awe. "The source of its power." Eleanor approached the machine cautiously, her eyes scanning the symbols and runes etched into its surface. "This isn't just a city, it's a prison. The Neru, the ancient race that built this place, they were trapped here by their own creation." "But why?" Lydia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would they trap themselves here?" "It wasn't intentional," Eleanor replied, her mind piecing together the fragments of information they had gathered. "They created this city as a refuge from a war, a place where they could be safe. But something went wrong. The city's defenses became too powerful, trapping them inside. And now, it's testing us, trying to determine if we're worthy to set them free." Marcus frowned. "And if we're not? Then the city remains hidden, and the Neru stay trapped forever." The weight of that realization settled over the group like a heavy fog. They were not just exploring an ancient city, they were being judged by it. As they examined the machine, Adam discovered a series of levers and switches, each one connected to a different part of the city's infrastructure. It was clear that this was the control center, the key to unlocking the city's secrets. But there was a catch. The controls were complex, and any mistake could have catastrophic consequences. The machine was designed to either free the Neru or unleash a destructive force that could wipe out everything within a 100-mile radius. "We have to be careful," Adam said, his voice trembling slightly. "One wrong move and we could destroy everything." Eleanor took a deep breath, her mind racing as she considered their options. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of everything they had been through. They had to make the right decision, not just for themselves, but for the Neru and the world beyond. "We can't leave them trapped here," Eleanor said finally, her voice firm. "But we also can't risk unleashing that kind of power. There has to be a way to disable the destructive force without sacrificing the Neru." Adam nodded, his fingers hovering over the controls. I think I can do it. But I need you all to trust me." The others exchanged nervous glances, but in the end, they nodded. They had come this far together, and they weren't about to turn back now. With a deep breath, Adam began to manipulate the controls, his hands moving with a precision born of both fear and determination. The machine hummed louder, the lights flickering as it responded to his commands. For a moment, it seemed as if everything was going to work. The machine began to slow, the energy levels stabilizing as Adam carefully disengaged the destructive mechanisms. But then, without warning, the machine emitted a high-pitched whine, and the ground beneath them began to shake. "What's happening?" Marcus shouted, his voice barely audible over the noise. "I don't know." Adam replied, his hands flying over the controls as he tried to regain control. "Something's wrong, it's not responding." The shaking grew more violent, and cracks began to appear in the walls of the hall, the ancient stone splitting under the pressure. Eleanor's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The machine was too old, too damaged. It couldn't handle the strain of what they were trying to do. "We need to get out of here," Lydia shouted, panic creeping into her voice. "The whole place is going to collapse." But before they could move, a blinding flash of light erupted from the machine, and everything went still. When Eleanor opened her eyes, she found herself lying on the ground, the hall around her eerily silent. The machine had gone dark, its once vibrant lights now completely extinguished. "Is everyone okay?" she called out, struggling to her feet. One by one, the others responded, each of them disoriented but unharmed. "What happened?" Frank asked, his voice shaky. "I don't know," Eleanor replied, her eyes scanning the room. "But I think the city's defenses have been disabled." Adam approached the machine, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "I managed to shut down the destructive force, but the Neru, they're still trapped." "I'm sorry, Dr. Reed. I couldn't save them." Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder, offering a small, reassuring smile. "You did your best, Adam. That's all we could ask for." But before the weight of their failure could settle in, a soft, ethereal voice filled the hall, echoing off the stone walls. "You have done more than you know, travelers." The team froze, their eyes widening as they looked around for the source of the voice. "Who's there?" Marcus demanded, his hand instinctively going to his weapon. From the shadows, a figure began to materialize, shimmering with a faint, otherworldly light. It was a tall, graceful being, its features both alien and beautiful, with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries. "I am the last of the Neru," the being said, its voice calm and soothing. "The guardian of this city, tasked with ensuring that only the worthy may enter." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat as she realized what they were seeing. This was no illusion, this was a living member of the ancient race they had been searching for. "Worthy," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "We passed your test." The Neru nodded. "Indeed. You have shown wisdom, compassion, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. You have proven that humanity is ready to inherit the knowledge of the Neru." Adam stepped forward, his eyes wide with wonder. "But we failed. We couldn't free you." The Neru smiled gently. "You did not fail, young one. By disabling the destructive force, you have ensured that the Neru may rest in peace. We are no longer trapped, but have chosen to remain in this form, as guardians of the knowledge that must not be lost. Eleanor felt a surge of emotion as the full weight of what they had accomplished began to sink in. They had not just discovered an ancient city, they had unlocked a legacy that would change the course of history. What happens now? Lydia asked, her voice tinged with awe. The Nera gestured toward the walls, where the murals and texts began to glow with a soft, golden light. Now, you take with you the knowledge and wisdom of the Neru, to share with your world. But remember, this city must remain hidden, known only to those who are pure of heart. It is a place of refuge, of learning, and of peace. Eleanor nodded, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. We will honor your legacy. The world will know the truth, and we will ensure that your knowledge is used for the betterment of all. The Neru smiled once more before fading into the shadows, their presence lingering like a soft breeze in the hall. The team stood in silence for a moment, each of them processing what had just happened. They had come seeking an ancient city, but they were leaving with something far greater, the wisdom of a lost civilization, and the knowledge that they had been deemed worthy to inherit it. As they made their way back through the city, the path seemed clearer, the buildings less ominous. It was as if the city itself was guiding them, leading them back to the clearing where their journey had begun. When they emerged from the city, the barrier that had once separated them from the outside world dissolved, allowing them to step freely back into the forest. Eleanor turned to look back at the city one last time, her heart filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The city of nothingness was no longer a place of myth and legend, it was real, and it had entrusted its secrets to them. Dr. Reed, Adam said quietly, breaking the silence. What happens now? Eleanor smiled, her eyes still fixed on the city. Now, we go home. And we make sure the world knows what we've found. As they began the journey back to their ship, the weight of their discovery settled over them like a warm blanket. They had come seeking answers, and they were leaving with a responsibility that would shape the future. The city of nothingness was not just a place, it was a promise, a beacon of hope for a world that so desperately needed it. And as they walked through the forest, the sun setting behind them, they knew that their journey was far from over. They had unlocked the secrets of the past, and now it was up to them to ensure that those secrets were used to build a better future. And so, with hearts filled with determination, they made their way back to civilization, ready to share the knowledge that would change the world forever. But as they disappeared into the trees, the city of nothingness remained behind, its secrets safe. Once more, waiting for the next group of travelers to prove themselves worthy.